I'm going to say yes. So I'm going to say again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this afternoon. So we've got a couple of things on the agenda formally, and then just some brief updates. I forgot to ask if I have control of the slides. I don't think I do this afternoon. So anyway, so we'll provide a few updates. So again, a reminder, this is one in a series of First Friday events. So we alternate with chair updates, and I'm electing as chair to include some other briefs along with that ECOP organizes for our administrators, deans, and directors. And so this is one of the benefits in terms of updates and professional development that you have. So next slide, I think describes just the way if you want to interact, certainly welcome you to raise your hand or use the comment features if there are questions that come up. Want to make this engaging and certainly want to respond to any questions that you might have. And I'll remind you that there's an opportunity at the end to complete a feedback survey. And in the ECOP Monday minutes, we'll have a link to the recording and other information. So next slide. So I'll use this slide just to remind you of a couple of things that have happened or kind of on our agenda. So one, if you weren't able to participate in kind of the special session that was a week or so, maybe 2 weeks ago now, on modernizing scholarship for the public good, I encourage you to take a look at the link, or if you don't want to watch the recording, to at least scan the materials. There was a good presentation by Elise Arbach on that, so that was rolled out at APLU, but there's a lot of information related to scholarship writ large within different types of institutions. And so I learned there's a different vocabulary that a lot of people use, but aligns well with the kinds of things that we use in extension scholarship, and so might serve your institution well if you're like us in that you have leadership talking about having people beyond the colleges of agriculture involved extensively in engagement and helping them to understand how to recognize and reward scholarship in the process. So some other announcements that you've seen recently. So Bill shared out yesterday, I think, the awards announcement. So a reminder that May 1 is the deadline for awards that would recognize some of your outstanding personnel, either as an individual or as part of teams or for their work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So check your email if you haven't yet seen that. You will also have seen, I think, through your EDAs, some sharing out of the data from the survey that you participated in last year to provide insights into the salaries and staffing of extension personnel in different regions and different states. And so I've studied that a bit. So the recent share out looks at the number of educators by region and does some salary comparisons for your region compared to the national average by program area. So for Ag and Natural Resource, Community Economic Development, FCS, and 4-H. And so there are a couple surprising things in that to me, but I'm guessing that some of us may hire at different levels for those different positions that leads to some of those differences. Some of the other conversations that we've been having, Bill and I met recently with the GAIN group, Globalizing Extension Innovation Network, and so there's some interest in revitalizing the level of engagement and involvement that extension directors have in support of international efforts. There's also, I think, an interest within NIFA, perhaps, of doing that. I know when we met earlier with Dr. Misra, he mentioned it. There's been a new program leader appointed there. And so we will have an opportunity during our upcoming meetings, the week of the Ag Outlook Forum, I think, to meet with the international program leader along with the tribal programs leader. And you'll see on this slide, it mentions NSF, USDA, EPA and others. So looking forward to that busy week of meetings there, to be followed closely in 2 weeks with the CARET meeting. And so we'll have CARET delegates from around the country making trips to not only the conference, but also making visits to the Hill. And some other updates from kind of our executive committee work. I'd just say that it's been reported the move of the National Impacts Database to the Extension Foundation is being finalized. One of the efforts that we've talked about extensively at NEDA and since is the initiative to start the conversations at all levels with respect to capacity funding. And so APLU has taken an interest and in fact taken a lead on helping to start to prepare us for those conversations by helping us to think about tools and communications pieces that might be valued in different conversations. And so Karan Gala has been busy developing some whiteboard kinds of things in advance of CARET. So we look forward to rolling out other materials, and in fact, you may expect to be involved at different stages in helping to inform communications pieces going ahead. But so that's in collaboration with Bev Durgan's initiative, so that those groups are aligned. In fact, Bev's and Jason are two of our representatives with the APLU committee that's focused on capacity building. I continue to appreciate the work of our different committees, so the Professional Development Committee and Program Committees. You'll hear in March from the program action teams and specifically the climate change group, which Jason has been very involved with several years, and has just recently had a convening that I understand has led to some great outcomes. So again, thanks to all of you who are involved with the program action teams and providing leadership to that. So I've mentioned upcoming events, and then we're also in the middle of planning our spring ECOP meeting, which Oklahoma is hosting the week of March 11th. I think with that, we'll shift to the discussion of the information that was shared out about the assessment vote, unless somebody has a question related to any of the things that I just mentioned. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands or anything, so we'll go on. So hopefully the communication was clear, but I'll just again remind you of kind of the process that we've been through and coming to this point. So there were three proposals that, or three alternatives that were discussed at NEDA and information shared related to those. So one was based on capacity. So you saw the numbers associated with that. There was the one that included competitive grants as well, and then relative to the current assessment. And so those alternatives were shared back along with the encouragement to discuss them at regional meetings. So we got summaries of the discussion at the regional meetings from the executive directors associated with those regional associations. There was a lot of great engagement, involvement in that, along with some differing opinions about how to move ahead, and different suggestions, I guess I would say, to better refine the proposals there. And so we took all that discussion into account. We had significant discussion within the chairs. I know the EDAs teams had significant discussion as well. And then we brought forward the proposal that you see here to the executive committee last week for further discussion and clarification. And so the proposal that will be on the ballot for vote soon is I guess I'd say a blending of the information that came back from those discussions, which provides the transparency that was part of the initial aim, particularly for the 1862s, and that it will be based on capacity funding because of concerns about equity and ability to pay. the 1890 institutions, the territory institutions, the ones that are listed here would remain at the 2024 baseline levels. And so the proposal is that this calculation method would remain in effect through 2027, at which time it could be reevaluated. This would apply, well, so the current ECOP budget is set at 600,000. So that was discussed, and each year we vote on that. We don't anticipate a change in the immediate future, but should there be a need to increase that budget, then the assessment would change in proportion to the current listing for all 76 institutions. Let's go to the next slide. So again, to remind me if there's anything that I've overlooked in the kind of the key points. So doing the reassessment to hold the 1890s and other institutions at their current level resulted in about $38,000 of additional costs that then were redistributed among the 50 1860 institutions. And so some of us saw additional increases from what had originally been calculated based on capacity funding from that you saw in the back at NETA. But again, you got the spreadsheet to show you the amount that it is. So it's still a 3-year rolling average. So your assessments could change from year to year. I guess that's the bottom bullet. And so you might see some variation just because of that. So I think that's it. So are there questions related to that, or Bill or others who've been involved in the discussion? Are there any key points that I overlooked? So you can expect that a ballot will be emailed to you in short order. I won't make a specific, but very soon, with the aim, and then like a 2-week horizon to return the ballot. If the ballot is sent to you and someone above you, the dean or Oz, or someone is the appropriate person to complete the ballot, then we'd ask that you forward it to them with any explanation and that might be needed by them. All right, any additional questions or comments? I hope it's straightforward now.
I see no
That's
activity in the chat. Oh, except for right
Okay.
now. It says you'll also be able to see key screenshots of key moments, that highlights or comments or action items to anything being said, and get an automatic summary of the meeting. And that's through an AI assistant that due to an AI assistant helping us take notes for this meeting.
Okay. All
So
right.
not a question, just an update. And
Okay.
Damona, I think that you did a great job of summarizing the current state of play.
Very good. Okay. And again, I appreciate everyone's involvement in the process. So I think it was very helpful to have all those insights and coming up with the final plan. Okay, with that, today we are pleased to have with us Christina from Lewis Burke Associates to provide us a bit of update on budget and legislative matters.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here chatting with you all. And feel free, I know that these things are not always crystal clear and sometimes complicated, so feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, put your questions in the chat if I'm being unclear. Please feel free to ask at any time. So happy to stop and want to make sure everyone's on the same page. But just giving a quick update today of kind of where things are at in Washington in terms of appropriations, so spending funding for the entire federal government, but of course those programs that we care most about at USDA and NIFA. And then I'll also spend some time later talking about the Farm Bill and kind of where the status is for that, because of course that only happens every 5 years, and we are in that exciting period where the Farm Bill is up right now. So we've of course been working on that for the last almost 2 years now, getting all of our materials prepared and everything like that. So with that, I'll jump in and start with the appropriations and funding side of things. So right now, Congress is still working on finishing up fiscal year 2024 appropriations. So the fiscal year 2024 started on the first day of October. The last one ended the last day of September. And so we've been kind of waiting and essentially kicking the can down the road in terms of getting legislation passed to finalize funding for fiscal year 2024 now for, of course, a couple of months. So we've been living for the last couple of months under what's known as a continuing resolution. And essentially what a continuing resolution is it's just flat funding at the last past fiscal year's levels. So everything stays flat. So that means that we are currently operating under the same levels that were funded back in fiscal year 2023. So we've been operating at those levels for the last couple of months. And what they're trying to do now is essentially update those numbers, add new dollars where they can. So you may have been hearing in the news that they are in the midst of those negotiations. Both the House and the Senate have released their bills indicating what funding levels they would like to have, but of course they now need to come together and negotiate what those final numbers will end up being. And the thing that's making it especially difficult this year, because you may notice that it's now February, the last couple of years, it's certainly slipped, but it's been a while since it's slipped all the way until February. The last couple of years, this has gotten done in like December, January. So the reason that it's particularly difficult this year is, again, you may remember in the news last year, they needed to pass a debt ceiling. They needed to raise the debt ceiling. And so essentially what happened was a year ago, they set a debt ceiling or a cap on the amount of total government spending that there is allowed to be for the next 2 years. And we are essentially now reaping what we have sowed. So that's why they're struggling to come to a negotiation, because there are, of course, a lot of programs that need and want to be funded and only so much money to go around because those caps were set. And so that will kind of be the case for this year and also the upcoming fiscal year. So you might hear folks on my team or on the Fanner team saying that this is a very difficult funding environment. When we're saying that, that's essentially what we're referring to, is that there are these caps on federal spending for the entire federal government. So it's not just for USDA. Really, every sector of the government is facing these spending limits. So that's what's making it tricky for them to come together on things. Just to give you an update on where things are at for extension right now, things for extension are pretty much flat, whether we get an FY 2024 bill passed or not. And believe it or not, that's not the worst position to be in, because remember I said this applies to the entire federal government. There are certainly some of your research pals and some of the folks on other parts of the government that are facing cuts. And so really the position that we're in, of course, we would always love to see increases. We've been advocating very hard to get increases, especially for those capacity accounts. But in this funding environment, of course, hard to come by. The good news is that the members of Congress and their staff do seem to really understand that, especially those capacity accounts equal jobs. And they seem to understand that any cuts to those capacity accounts equals cutting jobs, and they never want to be seen as doing that. So that's why those accounts have been able to stay flat. So whether they have to pass another continuing resolution, again, keeping funding levels flat, or we get some bills passed in FY 2024, our real priority is making sure that NIFA stays whole, that we keep all of those accounts funded, and that we don't see any cuts. That's, at this point, that's kind of what we're hoping for, because like I said, a lot of other folks are facing cuts, and we're doing our best to keep it so that we are not facing cuts. So I'll take a pause there. So that's kind of what's happening in this exact moment. So I'll take a second if there's any questions before talking about what's happening with the CARET meeting and how we're planning for fiscal year 2025. Because we're, of course, currently in a complicated situation where, because they have delayed, we're now working on almost 2 funding cycles at the same exact time, because FY 2024 has now run into FY 2025 because the big wheel keeps on turning. So, so now thinking about FY 2025, which is of course funding for this upcoming year, we have been working very hard with you all and with all of the parts of the BAA to compile what those priorities are for those funding levels. Largely, we have kept the request the same because we are, as I mentioned at the beginning, operating under the same difficult fiscal environment, difficult funding environment for next year. And so you can see, and I can try to pull it up and drop it in the chat for you here, is that we're just finishing up the list of asks, and you'll see a 1-pager here that I am sending in the chat that will show you all of the asks for fiscal year 2025 for extension and for all of the pieces of NIFA that we work in. So you can kind of see what those requests are going to be. And so that will all be happening. That's what the CARET meeting is about. Some of you all might be coming to town, coming to DC for PILD, and that's all advocating for those funding lines to make sure that your capacity accounts, which for extension, that's primarily Smith Lever, as well as extension for 1994s and extension for 1890s. Those are the accounts that are really relevant to you all. So take a look at those in that document that will kind of see what the ask is for those. And so that's what we're getting ready for, is over the next couple of the next month to few weeks, we'll be advocating for those requests and trying to get funding increased for those particular accounts. And then to give you a timeline of where things go from there, then hopefully Congress will be able to consider those, and we'll see some bills probably in the summer. That's what we'll see what progress has been made. So I think that's my summary on where things are at as far as funding. Are there any questions there before I try to do a quick version of what's happening on the Farm Bill? Or did I miss anything? Anyone else?
Christina, thank you so much for the update. This is Albert Essel, and I have a quick question for you. You indicated that for FY 24, extension will be flat, and that's kind of good news for under the circumstance. Now, when you say the extension is flat, do you mean all the extension lines?
Yes. So right now they are all 3 of the major extension lines. So Smith Lever is currently proposed in both bills to be kept flat at $325 million. Research grants for 1994 institutions, extension services at 1994 institutions is proposed to stay flat at $11 million. And then at 1890 institutions, extension services are proposed to stay flat at $72 million.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And if there are any other accounts that you had questions about, can certainly try to help answer those questions too. But
okay.
But yeah, so negotiations are ongoing. And of course, in the agriculture bill, there are a lot of considerations when it comes to funding that bill, because we're in the same bill, we're in the same boat as the WIC program, for example, that goes to provide services and resources to women and children. And so that particular program has seen a lot of budget shortfalls. There's a lot of attention being paid to it right now by members of Congress, and they're trying to make sure that program stays whole. And so remember, under these constraints, that's why, everybody has their requests, but we are kind of in the same boat with them. And of course, that's a very high priority as well. So with that, I'll talk briefly about the Farm Bill. So Farm Bill is separate from the appropriations bills. Essentially what the Farm Bill is you can think of it as the legislative mechanism to authorize bunch of the pieces of USDA and set the rules for how USDA operates, as well as setting what I like to call the credit limits, the authorization amounts for how much certain accounts are able to be funded at. So it sets authorizing and essentially the policy of how USDA operates. And NIFA is one of those agencies within USDA that is authorized via the Farm Bill. The good news for extension is that the Smith-Lever programs and a lot of the extension programs do not need an extension. They do not need, okay, now we're talking about the congressional term extension, do not need to be extended because they do not expire. So they don't have an expiration, which is good news because that means that we don't have to worry about the program's authorization lapsing. So the program can continue to run. It continues to be legal and everything will be fine there. The biggest thing for extension that we've been working on and paying attention to is protecting the 4-H name and emblem, making sure that use is protected. And we've gotten some good news from both the House and the Senate committees, majority and minority staff, that they've been working on that really hard. And they're hoping that will be a bipartisan thing that is in the bills. Really, the biggest thing with the Farm Bill is just a matter of getting floor time to get it passed. And of course, they still need to negotiate between the House and the Senate. We haven't seen bills yet released from either the House or the Senate, but we have heard rumors that especially the House side has been working really hard on their draft and hopes to get something out, could be as early as March. So we will, of course, be doing an in-depth analysis of that, and we will send you more information. But again, hoping to get some more information on the Farm Bill in March. But at this point, I am certainly a skeptic, and I don't really think that we'll be able to get the Farm Bill passed and finalized this calendar year because we have an election waiting for us in November, and that's going to just kind of suck all of the air out of the room. So it's definitely difficult to get floor time, which essentially means time on the congressional agenda to get this bill done because it's a package so large, it requires about 3 weeks of debate and negotiation and dedicated time to get something like this done. So we need to get the bill drafted, and then they have to have the time to push it through committee and then get it to the floor and get a vote on it. And all of that takes time. And they have the budget to figure out as well. So that's why we're thinking that the Farm Bill may have to get extended, and then it will potentially be kicked into next year. But of course, we're still advocating next calendar year. But of course, we are still advocating as much as possible because crazier things have happened, and sometimes bills end up moving really fast. So we're of course still sticking on it. But those are the biggest things that I wanted to flag for extension folks.
All right, thanks, Christina. Are there questions from anybody? I think that was a useful catch up for all of us, and hopefully if you weren't familiar with kind of where we stood, that caught you up on those things. So, all right, well, very good. I'm not seeing questions.
I have a quick question again. This is Albert.
Go, Albert.
Sure.
Christina, regarding the Farm Bill, I know that the BAA recommendations or priorities have been said already and is probably going to be part of the conversation. Is there any component of the BAA priorities that we need to be worried about?
I don't think that there are any that I would say that you need to be worried about. We actually spent the last 2 weeks talking with committee staff, and we went through ask by ask, that large packet that we all put together that has, like 50 some requests in it. We went through line by line through all of those and asked for a status report on all of those. The overarching thing that I would say on those that are going to be the most difficult, I think anything that just needs a simple reauthorization, changing the year, that's going to be no problem. I know that there are some folks that were asking to remove matching requirements from a couple of programs. Those in Congress's eyes, in the congressional lawyers' eyes, the councils, those cost money because you're, of course, removing a match. So sometimes those get more difficult to do, especially on the House side. The other thing that's difficult to do is increase authorizations. So there were a couple of programs that we were requesting increased authorizations because they were coming up on the maximum allowed amount of funding that those programs were able to receive. And so those are some examples of other programs that if they need increased authorization of funding, so not real dollars, but authorizing funding, those ones are a bit more difficult to get, but it's of course not the end of the world. That still means that they'll still be able to reauthorize the program and the program will still be able to continue, but it just might not have the highest credit limit that we would want it to have. So nothing threatening or existentially threatening. But I think it's just going to be difficult to get any sort of things that have to do with money through at this point. It's more of the policy fixes that they're able to do right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Jorge?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you, Christina. Every time you present about this, we always learn something new or a new variation of it. And thank you, Karen, for sharing the Farm Bill information. I just wanted to report back the meeting last week where Senator Capito and Senator Bozeman, the stakeholder visit here went really well, really well. We were able to formulate our concerns and our requests that were listened very carefully. And frankly, at the end of the day, Senator Bozeman said, I love extension. We love extension. Both his daughters participated in extension. His wife was, an extension homemaker and all that kind of stuff. So they had that connection. So thank you for all of you who contributed to some of the pointers I was able to use over there. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for advocating and glad to hear that it could go so well.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jorge. All right, any other news announcements, reminders, clarification questions? Okay,
The only
Sandy
thing that
has,
I'll add is that
Okay.
both Karan and Christina have added a few links to the chat, and I will make those available here either in the Monday Minute or else very soon.
thank you. And Sandy's dropped in the jot form for survey. And a reminder that our next First Friday will take place on March 1st. And again, we look forward to updates from the program action teams with an expanded version for the climate team to talk about some of their recent work and their recent summit. So thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I look forward to seeing you in March, if not before. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.